Good evening. Welcome to Wanderers TV, live from Adams Park, or I am at least. I'm Phil, your host this evening, and we're going to be joined by the Wycombe Wanderers chairman, Rob Couhig, who is in Louisiana. And hopefully, by the magic of technology, we can invite Rob into the room now. Hey, Rob, how are you?
I'm doing terrific, Phil. Good to be with you guys. And before we get too far started, let me just say I missed being with you the other night in what I think was one of the great nights in Wycombe history. The night for Joe Jacobson, a true warrior for this club in the time I've been there, and certainly before I got there. And I was looking at the photos earlier today to see some old friends and people who have really contributed to the club over the year. Dominic Gape was there with that big smile of his, and Anthony Stewart, who to my mind was one of the unsung heroes of our ascendancy. You didn't go through Anthony and come out unscathed. Let's just leave it at that. And so great to see him and all the guys that showed up, old and new. Joe deserved it. And of course, the wonderful Wanderer fans who were there. It shows you what a special club this really is.
Absolutely. And we've got fans' questions here as well. They've been submitted in advance. Also, if you're watching live on YouTube, you can see how to get involved on the show this evening. You can email in, you can join the YouTube chat as well. We got Rob here with us for an hour. So in true Rob Couhig style, I guess everything's on the table, right, Rob?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Right. We've got a few sort of quick bullet points here, which I think is going to bring us up to speed quite quickly in case there's a few of us who aren't maybe glued to Twitter 24/7. So question one.
Put me down as one of those, not glued to Twitter. Go.
Why did the search for a new training ground begin, and why can't we stay at Marlow Road?
Well, the search for a new training ground began almost from the day that we came in. Pete and I had a chance to look at it, and look, it's a serviceable training ground for a mid-level League One club in all likelihood, particularly with the vast improvements we've put in, everything people don't get to see, from simple things like a car park, to the multiple new offices for the coaches and manager, the enhanced dining facilities, the new changing room just for the first team, which allowed us to create a changing room for the developmental squad, special areas for the boots and kits and the like, an expanded laundry facility. Most importantly, probably, I think it's got one of the better medical facilities that in League One. If you ask he and I kid, because for 4 years, the question was, what do you want now? And the last time was, he told me he had everything, but he was working at thinking up something. So but when you moved out of that, and we put in the big meeting room downstairs, which, as you know, the club never had, and the like. But when you went outside, we have 2 1/4 pitches. One's a 3G semi sort of pitch that really doesn't work for much, except maybe short efforts by guys on really terrible days. But the 2 pitches lack good drainage and good moisture. And so we lose about 25 to 35% of our time when we could be practicing. We also don't have enough room, because we would like 3 pitches minimum, real full-size pitches, so you can rotate them and keep them going. We would probably put in a pitch very similar to the one we have in Adams Park, but we're not going to do it on somebody else's land or where we don't have a long-term lease like we have at Adams Park. So we've been looking, and this is not a surprise to the owners. They have been terrific. They have cooperated with us. I made sure I told them before the news got out, after the leakage, what was going on. And Ian could not have been more gracious in speaking for Ivor and for Brian. So it's just, we're a bigger club. Let's come right down and say it, than that training ground permits. And we had to have a plan that if we can move from there, we can assist the foundation and moving a lot of its programs there. We can assist the women's team by maybe giving them a permanent place to practice and or play their games. So it was a win-win-win situation, we thought. But we've been thinking that for 3 years, and we've been looking at various places, and I'm not at liberty to tell you those places, but the active search has been really intensified over the past 4 months.
And we spoke on one of these a couple of years ago. You were talking about Little Marlow being an option. What happened to that site? Because in terms of location, it would tick a lot of boxes.
It's a great location. I don't know that it's a great location for an academy, which is sort of in our periphery of dreams. It has a lot of work that needs to be done. You know, basically it's built on a quarry. And so we've looked at that. We took an option on it at one point, and we had the money returned we asked for it back because they couldn't move forward for various reasons. Plus, as you may know, and you probably do, there's a lot of sensitivity in that area right now about planning. The film studio next door started planning before I think I bought into the club, and they haven't dug the first shovel of dirt yet. So we want to be judicious with our time and with our money, and that's why we've been kind of looking at ready-made stuff.
Is it true that someone from Wickham, or even yourself, or people from the club went to Bearwood in November? That's a rumor that's been circulating on social media.
Yeah, it is. It's a great facility. We went to see what a great facility looked like at the invitation of some people. It wasn't a skullduggery mission. And let me say this. It may be the finest facility in all of England, or at least that part of England. And when we looked at it, we said, well, this would be nice. But it wasn't with the idea of, let's go buy it, even though everybody knew the club was in trouble.
So it wasn't, it wasn't under the premise of a for sale sign. It wasn't come and have a look round and bring the tape measure. It wasn't one of those sort of trips.
No. In fact, I'm trying to remember. I may have been invited to go along with some people who were looking at maybe buying all of Reading, and they want to know what I thought of it. And you know me, I'm a curious guy. I got an extra day in England. I'm going to go spend it. I could either go to the Royal Museum or I could go look at a pitch. And I thought, well, I'll go do this. But when you looked at the facility, it's fantastic. So when the advertisement came up, which was what it was, here's our training ground. Somebody please come buy it. We said, okay, we'll go buy it.
And when was that, for clarity?
2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, a week before it all blew up. And people make a big misunderstanding. They say, well, there's one of these guys that somebody keeps shooting me a copy of what he says. He's like, I can't believe a trained lawyer would do this without doing due diligence. Well, we hadn't done it. What we had said is, subject to due diligence, we might be willing to do this deal. But, we live in an age in which everybody thinks they're an expert on stuff. We would never buy it unless all the impediments to title were taken care of. That was known in the agreement. I mean, there's nothing shocking about that. I don't know who released the information. And look, I tell people all this all the time now. If you go buy an office building, you don't call your competitors and say, I'm thinking of going and buying an office building. What do you think? So he can go out and spread the word and jack the price up on you. And this whole concept of somehow you're doing violence to Reading is preposterous. It really is. But, these folks, when you look at it, the Reading football team does not own that facility. It really doesn't. So there you go. But I'm not arguing with them. They've been through a lot, whether it's self-induced when they stormed the field and they thought they achieved something. I don't know. When they made threats against Pete and against some of our fans, such that the EFL took our tickets off of sale for Wembley for a while, where it was restricted. I don't know what good they think they accomplished, other than they got to go on whatever social media outlet they have and say, look at us, we're bringing this team to heel. Do they really think they brought more buyers to the scene? Have you
Rob,
seen somebody come up and buy it? I missed
I'm gonna ask you a question that's come in because it's pertinent to what you've just said, because that demonstration on the pitch by Reading fans was in reaction to the almost a fire sale of some of their players in the transfer window.
Right.
That's what the Reading fans felt they had to do to bring that to the fore. Will Peake has sent in a few questions, and the first one is quite pertinent at this point. He says, "What's the reputational damage to Wycombe Wanderers Football Club considered before making a bid to buy Bearwood training facility from Dai Yonggi, considering that such a move could potentially be facilitating the stripping of assets or perceived stripping of assets from another football club? Was any advice sought as to how prudent such a move would be from a PR perspective? Because we saw what happened in January when the Reading fans felt the only option they had was to get on the pitch in relation to the player sales."
No, that was my call, and I lived with the call. I thought that we could do the investigation into it. I thought that based on what I had seen, look, that club has been for sale for what, 4 months, 5 months? It's been in dire straits. Nobody's jumped forward yet to buy it. They said they wanted to sell it. We looked at it. We thought it would work for our purposes. We thought that, in one thing that does get me, people say, how do you know this money isn't going to the owner, the guy who bought it? Well, actually, we do know. All the money that we were putting up this month and next was directed monies to pay the taxes and to pay the players and the staff.
Okay, so that's why that was included in our statement. Then is for clarity.
Yeah, but you know what? It makes me sound defensive. We've done nothing wrong. If the house down the street is going for sale, and you hear about it from your neighbor that she's thinking of putting it up for sale, and she tells you about it, and you put in an offer, and then the following week the advertisement that she had planned on comes out, that you had some extra knowledge. Does that make you an evil person? You shouldn't buy it.
Do you think
I don't understand. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's a cultural thing. When somebody tells me they have something for sale, and I read it, I look at it, and I say, well, I might be interested. Would you be willing to accept X as a price for it? And by the way, we know you have some financial problems with your business. We're going to mandate that until the sale closes, this is how the deposit will be used. It will save your club. I don't know what I did wrong, but you know what? I've done plenty wrong in my life. So if this is it, it's it.
And so one last
that's
point.
That's the dog in the background. She's upset with the whole conversation.
Fair enough. We'll get our first guest on in a second, but one last question. What next? Is Bearwood dead in the water from a Wycombe perspective? And then presumably the other options are still being investigated at pace as well.
Let me answer the second half first. We are looking, the committee, after their, excuse me, I have to let the dog out. Literally, you now know the answer to that question as to who let the dog out. Is that an English? Do y'all have that sort of?
That song was a hit here, Rob. Yeah, no worries with that.
Okay. We are continuing to look. We expect to have an answer to where we're going in the not too distant future. If you pinned me down and said, what's the not too distant future? I can't tell you if that's a month or 5 months from now, but we're going to keep up on looking. Our lease is structured such that on Marlow Road, with adequate notice, we can leave. But we've already started the work with the foundation and with the owners of the facility that when and if we leave, it will be a transformation into something better for the club.
Okay. Right, we can invite Ollie in, please. Ollie, good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can,
yes, sir.
And we can see you as well. Isn't technology
great? Good, even better.
What would you like to ask, Rob, Ollie?
And Ollie, you got more stuff going on in your background than I do.
There are a lot of them. There's also a dog. There's also a dog, Rob. But he's outside, so don't worry about that. Rob, I was watching listening to the HP Heroes of HP12 podcast, right, in which you spoke about, and I forget the exact language you used. You spoke about how this was being done, the deal was being done in a way that would protect Wycombe from any future obligations when it came to purchasing the training ground. And you seem to be suggesting that there was a separation there of some sort.
Sure.
And I wondered what that meant exactly, and whether it was Wickham buying the training ground, or you buying the training ground, or Felicia buying the training ground, and whether, just for argument's sake, in 5-10 years' time, if you sold Wickham, would you be selling Wickham without a training ground in that example? And by the way, I've been to Bearwood Park, and it is beautiful.
It is. The answer is we were buying it through our holding company, which is Feliciana. Feliciana owns 90% of Wickham. The reason we were doing that is we have always stated we're not going to put debt onto the club that the club can't afford. If you look at our financial statement, so that answers that question. It was a Feliciana asset. If and when the time comes for me to sell, that will depend in large measure on the buyer. If the buyer wants it all and they pay the right price, yes. If the buyer only wants one or the other, then that's what they'll get. Same situation as in Reading, as far as I can see. And the confusion I think sometimes fans have is, well, does the training ground belong to the owner of the training ground or to the club? And as you know, Adams Park belongs to the trust. I don't own it. We lease it from them. There will be some nominal lease on the new training ground for the club to afford, but it won't be anything outrageous that can cripple the club, such that if we were to sell it, there'd be plenty of time to find another place and all. It won't be a deal where, and that's sort of what got me, people were acting like we were going to kick Reading out the next day. And it's just stupid to think that. But because they hadn't read a single thing and they all went off, I'm sorry, I'm verging into the thing I told Missy I wasn't going to do, talk about all this stuff. But we will sell it if the price is appropriate. And I think it will not burden the club. I know where I was going with this. If you look at the audited financials came out, and it shows the club, I want to say, owes, could be either 7 million or 10 million. And I'm not being facetious about the amount. I know that the amount of extra debt that was incurred under my watch over the past 5 years was really that debt that you see in the 3 million that was added to it in that year that was audited, which was a planned addition to the debt that Feliciana lent the club on purpose. And we're doing it again this year because we're building up assets that we think are valuable. But when we sell the club, it'll probably be sold with the debt on it, or some accommodation will be made. But 7 million of that will never be paid, as far as I know. I've spent a lot of money trying to see if there's a way to use those debts some other place or way, and there's not. So it's going to stick with the club. Does that answer it?
It does answer it, and it also answers, I think, the question a lot of people were asking online, which is how can a little club like Wickham Wanderers afford a shiny training ground like this one? But I think that answers it.
You've been talking to Missy, haven't you? The truth is, we will have additional investors in Feliciana. We're not going to take out a loan to buy it. We're going to pay cash.
Understood.
Rob, this is a good opportunity to bring a question in as well that was sent in by Nick Coles. I'm going to try and get the main points of it. It's quite a long question, but given the state of the club, how is spending even half of the 25 million of the media reported fee for the training ground? That's a big change in direction for the club in terms of its ambitions. And this is really connected with where that investment is coming from.
Yeah, I would say it's not a change in ambition. It's, look, we have spent a lot of money that doesn't go into the bottom line of the club. One of the reasons we went from 75 to 90% ownership is so that we could spend that money, but we don't put infrastructure specific cost on the club. The money we've spent has been budgeted amounts that we expected, but there's no tail, as it were. There's no guaranteed. The way you get in trouble as a business is if you sign something, you're going to pay a player 500,000 pounds this year and you commit for the next 3 years, and then he has an injury or whatever. We don't have any of that. We don't have any leases that we can't pay. Our lease on the present training ground, we could pay it a month if we had to. And I don't think there's anything else out there, Phil. I could be wrong. Well, we could pay the entire lease amount on the stadium for less than 600,000 for the next 50 years, and we'd be done. So, and those are the big things. You're looking for big things. Probably the biggest deal we still have is our infrastructure improvements, Wi-Fi. You remember we went with the whole system, and that is done on a lease basis. It's got about another 4 or 5 years to go, and then we own it. So yeah, I don't begrudge any of that.
And also going back to the next questions here, is there a 5/10/even 20-year plan to justify the level of spending? Listening to your answer there, because it's owned by your group, technically, is that just essentially a land deal, and then that's just going to appreciate in value? So does that sort of give you your sort of, I suppose, justification in terms of a business sense?
Our justification is we believe it will enhance the club by bringing in a better, and look, I love our players, but they all know this. You're always looking to bring in, a better player. It's the nature of the beast. And we think that with this new training ground, it will improve our ability to bring in better players, have a better developmental squad in terms of having a few bit more members. But most importantly, Phil, and I'm not committing to an academy because you know my feelings on them, but it allows us, either through me or if there's a subsequent owner or one of the new investors who wants to separately put up the money for it, we might go the academy route as well.
Nick's second question is, if anything should be learned from our neighbours in Berkshire, is being beholden to an owner/investor with very deep pockets. It's great up to a point until they get bored and stop supplying the cash to fund what he's called their pet project. So what do you say to that?
I think that's a great point. We saw it happen up in Derby with Mel Mars. You see it throughout the league. It's one of the reasons why I have pushed for cost restrictions across the board. People think I'm old-fashioned, but I think every team in the league should have an equal amount to spend on their first team. And then anything you spend beyond that to enhance your club, to enhance your facilities, good on you. But that's the only, and then you put a prohibition on what kind of loans can exist. It's a simple prohibition. Loans to owners should not be able to be collateralized against club ownership. In all practicality, they're not. But when a guy like Mel Mars gets into it, everybody made a big deal because I think the club owed him, what was it, 200 million pounds or something like that. But at the end of the day, he didn't get that, but he used it as a cudgel in the administrative process. Under my thought, you wouldn't be able to, because an owner debt, while it has to be repaid out of proceeds as long as you're running the club, you can't walk away with that debt unless the new owner pays it off. So there's a lot of ways to get there, but I agree with the premise of the question. As to us, the way we're doing it, if I got bored and Pete didn't want to do it, and Missy said we're going home, and we simply gave the keys back to the club would have a terrific stadium and have a right to use a facility, and everybody would probably never say, "Where's Couhig?"
On your last trip here, I think prompted by a Company's House document that was made for public knowledge, that everyone can access those, about the name and identity of the investor into Feliciana EFL. You named the person on the night in the bar. This sort of ambitious move to try and purchase Bearwood or now an alternative training facility, it's put figures out there. It's a lot of money. Does that mean we're a little bit further along in the process to formalizing or maybe introducing to the fans your investor?
I think that the day is not too far. Let me say this. He and I have become good friends. We trust each other totally. I feel comfortable not spending his money, but spending mine, and hopefully he would assist or someone similar. When the time is right, we'll tell you. I will say this, before the 1st of June, I expect to make several announcements about what we're doing in terms of investors. But just as I was sort of affronted by the leakage of what was going on last week, I'm not going to be a participant in talking about any individual until that person is or is not ready to be talked about.
I mean, just to go back to that process, that leak that appeared in The Athletic, great bit of journalism by Matt Slater, by the way, but it's kind of opened a whole can of worms here, because all of this, what we've talking about up to this point, you could have had an offer accepted in principle, doing the due diligence, found the problems, moved on, and we'd have all been none the wiser. Was that the proviso, really?
That's exactly why you do a confidentiality and a due diligence. And it's frustrating, because I think I now know where the leak came from. It wasn't from our side, because only 3 people on our side knew it. And 2 of those people would have been fired had it been them. And they knew that.
Okay, so we're going to go to some more questions that have been submitted. We've answered quite a lot of them as we've been going, which is excellent.
That's because I talk too much, somebody said.
I know. This is that you answer about 8 questions in one. From Andy Carpenter, this is finances again. When Rob was voted in back in 2020, he said Wycombe Wanderers will become financially sustainable. Recently published accounts show a loss of 3 million. I think people have seen what's come out today as well. And, to the uninitiated in terms of looking at spreadsheets, and I include myself in that, it doesn't scream sustainability, Rob.
No, but you're also ignoring, and look, I have this conversation domestically, okay? The biggest proponent of sustainability is Missy Couhig. And what I've shown her is, if you go back the year we were in the year we took over, we paid off all the debts. We basically ran the club without creating any debt. Then even in the midst of COVID, incidentally, we had a loss on our books that was ultimately covered by insurance and owner equity. Then you go into the championship year, and Pete and Garrett did a masterful job of putting up a budget that, albeit we got demoted by 1 point or relegated by 1 point, and I still believe that was because of Derby's failure to follow the rules properly. We made, in effect, $3 million or 3 million pounds. We didn't have to pay taxes, because the club, when we bought it, had $7 million of past losses. So that year in the championship, we put 3 million pounds up. The following year, we used that 3 million because we thought we legitimately were this close to getting re-promoted. If you remember the game against Sunderland, where we lost at Wembley, and going into everybody had high hopes. Had we won that game, we would have moved on to the championship, and we already knew what we were going to do with the money. We would have had another sustainable year. Or sustainability is not the right word, would have had a net revenue year. That following year, we again said, we have a club that's worth it to us as owners, and we'll put in 3 million pounds, which we can afford. And so this year, I'd expect about the same. Along the way, though, Phil, and this is why I get into arguments with Missy sometimes, there's a difference between sustainability and net revenue. We have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in young guys who we are now beginning to make money from. When Annis left, we made $1 million. When we've got a couple of defenders this year who we could easily make real money from should we make that decision. We have a winger that I think will be worth some real money down the road, and a lot of other players. So when we took over, we had 8 players, and with all deference to them, there was nobody there, or maybe 1 or 2 we could have sold and brought in 100 and 200,000. We probably have 4 to 5 players on our squad who, over the course of their lifetimes, will bring £1 million of transfer fees into this club. So that's why when I look at a 4 million, 3 million pound loss, I'm looking against what we've developed You're part of our development team in the sense that Wanderers TV, when we started off, we had no revenue. And I don't want to get into your business on here any more than I get in, but Wanderers TV is now a big profit center for us. Not big, not as big as it should be, okay, but big and getting bigger. So that's, I hope that answers the question.
I hope you weren't hoping Wanderers TV was going to fund your new training ground, Rob, because I've got news for you. It's not going to happen. Question from Sean Switchin here. Is it true that we gave Reading an upfront sum of money to pay their wage bill as part of the arrangement to purchase the training ground? Has it been repaid if money had been paid? And if not, when will it happen? I think that another rumor from online there.
It was not paid because we didn't conclude the deal. We had restrictions on how that money was going to be used because, look, and this is what people don't seem to understand. It's not in our best, it's in our best interest for Reading to be successful. Nobody wants them to go out of business. I mean, I understand hating an owner. I've got some fans of ours who aren't particularly pleased with their owner, apparently. Those things happen. But the club itself, I always ask people, what's your alternative? And the answer I get from a lot of the folks at Reading has been, we're going to drive the dies out. Okay? And who's going to come in? Hopefully, and we're trying to work with some people now to encourage them to go in. We really are. I don't care if people believe it or not, but if these guys go in and they buy it, everybody will know we try to help them.
There is a huge sort of upsurge in American involvement in English football teams. You've been here 5 years, 6 years now. There's several other, as well. And it goes back to the question I asked you on day one, and it would apply to people who were buying Reading. Why? Because, it's a money pit, isn't it?
No, it doesn't have to be. Reading could make money. The way it's been run has been not the way we would run it. I mean, start with this. Would you put 70 million pounds into a pitch or a training ground? Would you have an academy that annually loses 10 million pounds in the hopes of making money down the road? Would you go out and spend money on players that you don't need? I think that they either did it badly or they got bad advice and followed it. But they are where they are. They've dug their own hole. And that's the part that I sometimes have trouble with fans. I didn't see any of these sell before we die people out there complaining when the man went out and spent 90 million pounds on a training ground. And now he has the audacity to want to get some of that money back. Or when he spent money on players that, frankly, he shouldn't have. Maybe I've missed it because I haven't been a fan of Reading and never will, or haven't been a fan of Reading. So I don't know what they've done. Maybe somebody out there could tell me when they complained loudly that they were overspending.
Rob, is it different in America? Because Wickham nearly went out of business over 10 years ago. And, as fans, we felt that very closely in terms of, the risk of us losing our club, losing everything, and perhaps having to start again. We've seen it a lot in this country in recent years. We're seeing it now with Reading. This isn't like another business disappearing from the town. It's like a community asset, fans of emotional attachment, etc., family ties, all these other things. It makes it a lot more kind of prevalent online. It means emotions run high. Is it the same in America? If a sports team folds, disappears, moves, what happens? Is it the same outcry?
We don't have them die necessarily, and I'll explain why in a second. But moving is not uncommon. The umbrage that's taken at MK Dons would not happen in America. My brother Kevin, who's, as you know, a history buff of English football, explained it, and then I've read several books. Really, the history of English football is the local businessman, mill owner, whatever, paid for the club. It was the entertainment for the workers. And so everybody got used to it basically being run out of his pocket. And that's continued. If English football, I'm going to give you 2 minutes you didn't ask for in our pregame. wanted to save itself, the smartest thing it could do would be to adopt a rule that no club could spend more than it gets in from the league and its media packages. Pure and simple. That's what you can spend on your first team. All the other money, so that a club like Reading or Derby or anybody else, the rest of that money would be spent on the infrastructure, on the academies, on the developmental squads, on the under 21s, which you would never be in a position where a team would go under, because the only money it would have, and there'd be a bar against borrowing using this money, would be from the league and from media. Maybe you put in something for tickets, I don't know, but it'd be very, very limited. That's what we do. So the New Orleans Saints have a huge pool that they can pay their fans, their players, but Dallas, which has 3 times the population, 4 times the population, a huge backlog of season ticket holders or wannabes, they can't spend any more money on their team than the Saints can. Therefore, we're competitive from top to bottom. The other thing that they can do, and well, I'm tempted to get into the whole EFL Premier League deal, but I'll leave that.
We're coming up to that. We are going to cover that as well.
Okay.
But just finally on that, Rob, has it been a sort of a learning curve or a shock to you culturally, the difference between an English football fan and a sports fan in the US?
Yes and no. Intense sports fans are intense sports fans. They all believe that they can pick a better first baseman than the manager did when we lose a game. And we can't understand why he's only has, out of a squad of 25, 10 left-handed pitchers and no right-handers until he wins the World Series. And then they were supportive all along. So that's the same. I think what happens is, and this may be more social media filled than fans, but there's an intense relationship with the clubs through the ability to talk online in real time about everything that the club does. And so I think that generates this sort of constant bubble of what about this, what about that? I don't think fans in America are as concerned about what an owner does or what the general manager does. They're interested in how did we do last game and what's the chances of us winning the next game. Should we trade for a player or not? That's common. But the intensity that goes into all the internet battles behind the scene, nobody really cares about.
Right, question here from Thomas McKenzie. Have other owners from the EFL reach out to Wickham on the reaction to the Bearwood news? Darren McAntony raised that one EFL club would not do business with Peterborough United due to a fallout. Is there any ill feeling between other clubs towards Wickham as a result of what's happened with Bearwood?
None at all. In fact, I've heard from a couple pointing out that we would not be the first team by any stretch of the imagination to buy another team's training ground to help them out. And so if they haven't told me. I think Dara actually would be the one who could complain the most because he got limited in who he could sell tickets to as well to our game at Wembley, which is, it's not right. He knows, though, that we weren't out there advertising all this. It's because somebody, I suspect, from the other camp had their own reason for getting out in front and trying to kill the deal.
You referenced the EFL Premier League arrangements. I guess it's been a bit lost in what's been going on between Wickham and Reading, but there's been a delay to this. There's still no agreement. I know you've been keenly waiting for this to be sort of finalised and announced. As a chairman, what's your understanding of where we're at? What can you tell us?
We're exactly where we were a year ago, waiting on Godot to come around. The EFL is sensitive to what the economic terms were going to be. We were in agreement that we would do the cost cutting, which I think is fundamentally important, even more so in some ways than the money that comes in, because it makes sure you don't get into trouble like this. And the Premier League has decided for its own good purposes that it can't rationalize how to pay for it when they have a history of how they've paid for things in the past. Wealthiest club put up the most money. It's the progressive taxing system, basically. And they can't figure out what to do with what I would call the Magic Six. Bottom three in the Premier League, top three in the Championship. And you might call it even the Magic 8, 4 and 4, because they're the ones who really ride that rail of what about parachute payments? What are we going to do about those? But I really think it's more that they can't quite get their act together because they don't really like relegation. They don't like the fact that we're competing. Somebody asked me today what would happen in America with this, and I told them, frankly, EFL in America would sell itself to a wealthy investor and compete. Stop begging and compete. We have a product that is in many ways every bit as good. I'm not saying we're as good as Liverpool and Manchester City and those, but you look at some of our teams and the way we play, the intensity with which we play, and the innovation with which we bring to the game, and the world growing worldwide. And it's not just the Wanderers phenomenon, but the growing worldwide interest in all of English football. And, but look, to do that, you'd have to ask our owners to forego a huge paycheck for 3 years while they fought it out and put up real money. So I don't know that ever comes about. So here we are, as I told Rick Perry this morning, who would have thought you could make a Rob Couhig actually endorse a government regulator? I mean, the whole idea is anathema to me, but I don't know what else we do. They've pushed us to it.
Have you got a figure that you would be happy with in terms? I mean, you can't speak for all chairmen. I know you'd like to, but is there a figure that you'd be happy with if it was offered?
The figure's agreed by everybody, Phil. It basically rises as the tide rises for everybody, depending on where you are in the league, how well you've done. It slots us all in. It would, for our club, mean an immediate impact of 50% on our money from the Premier League, and it would go up over time. I mean, it's a fantastic deal, and it's not too expensive for the Premier League. They have not one person, to my knowledge, has said, "Oh my God, this is too expensive for us." It's all about who's it too expensive for. We had a great United States Senator down here by the name of Russell Long, who used to say, "Don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax the man behind the tree." And there's a little bit of that going on.
Question here from Gary Paul. The new road, this is the road mooted that comes in through the West Wickham estate, is key to the growth. It's something you've spoken about at length. It's been going on for a few years now. What's the update?
Let me give you some positive news. When I was over last time, Rachel Shimon, who is the head of the council, the governmental side of the council, asked for a meeting, and she brought in the top person from the planning and traffic division, who's been working with our guys for 2 years. And basically, she committed to us that she would work with us to get this situation solved during the course of the summer so we could begin our road construction by the beginning of next season. Neil tells me the road construction actually will only take about a month. So there's no reason why we wouldn't be in it for the start of next season or very shortly thereafterwards that we're aware of. It's funny because, as we explained to her, the planning and traffic studies demonstrate it would be better for West Wickham. Instead of bringing more cars through at the busiest time of a Saturday, we put them up over Sarah Dashwood's hill, and they stay and they get out. And it doesn't cause any problems to anybody. But you and I often talk about what would it be that finally drives me out? It will be frustrations like that I've been trying. Well, I mean, the trust has been trying, let's go all the way back. Since Lodes Park was abandoned and the club moved out there, they've been trying to put in a better access road system. And so I've been after it for 3 years. Neil will tell you that every time I call, the first question I ask is, where are we with my road? So I'm feeling better about it, but I'm a perpetually optimistic guy.
I was just about to say your optimism on all things. I think the road being the key one. You were so optimistic about it when you started this process. That a lot of our fans probably delighted in the fact, telling you that actually no, the planning process here is a lot different. It can take a long time. They've been proven right on this. Are you a bit worried about maybe setting another target here and having that thrown back at you?
If it happens, it happens. I'm not afraid of much.
And what they're going to call this road, Rob, when it's built?
The blunt fill access road.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. It'll be full of potholes after 3 weeks. It won't be. It'll be a fabulous road once it's built, obviously.
It will be.
The attendance figures have been a big talking point for our fans. They've been in decline this season. Why is that?
Well, I think when you take us 3 Saturday games, in which you expected 7,000, 8,500, and you move them to a Tuesday, and you actually get 4,000 if you count out everybody who went in twice. That's it. It's nothing too bothersome to me. I would like to do better. I encourage. I think we've done things. We've actually an interesting thing. We've asked Joe Jacobson to help Neil as we look at these issues and get closer to our fans and what we can do. I think one of the things we have to do is move beyond selling to ourselves and get into selling to others who haven't been to a game, don't realize how much fun it is. We're going to have to make our stadium more creature comfort friendly. We want to do it where it is now. And hopefully, but if you don't have an access road, it's hard to do any changes to the stadium, because the first thing the planning commission says is, well, you're only allowed to have, we're not allowed to have 10,000 people in it. We're only allowed to have 9,600 in it.
Question just on YouTube on that very subject. Is there any news or has there been any progress in terms of developing areas of the ground, such as the terrace, to increase the matchday experience and the capacity of Adams Park overall? I know you spoke of some quite detailed plans at one point about the development here at Adams Park.
We have the plans. We've had the tentative plans ready, but we have been told by our planners that until this road mess is fixed up, it doesn't do us any good to submit. Although Neil and I talked about it this week, we're considering putting in plans in the next 2 weeks anyway. Now that we've learned our lesson that it's going to take 16 years, we get started.
So basically, if there's no road, there's no additional capacity allowed in our current site.
We might be able to jimmy a little bit of stuff, and there's some things we're looking at. One of the things we want to do is bring the pitch closer to the fans. And you say, what do you mean by that? If you look at where we are now, if you take our pitch and you pull it towards the corner of the Whiffaway Stadium stand and the Frank Adams stand, to that corner right there, you can pull it about 15 yards closer to those fans, which would allow us to build out our terrace, and we would bring it right behind the net. So bring those fans 20 yards closer to the pitch, probably put them up a little bit, standing room, and then build out our origin stand so that it becomes more right on the field instead of sitting back with more suites and the like, that we would be able to enhance our game day revenue.
Another question that came up on YouTube earlier as well, and it's been mooted around on social media as well. Whilst out looking for alternative training sites and development opportunities, have you been tempted to include a stadium in that development alongside it?
We have not been, but we have been approached about 1 or 2 spots that seem to meet our interests, or not interests, but our needs. We need a place that's easy to get to. I think you asked about attendance. To get to our stadium requires effort. And if you look at traffic patterns and their influence on lower level league teams, there's almost a direct relationship to how hard is it to drive there? How hard is it to take a train and get there? And I got to tell you, our stadium is probably in the top 5 in terms of difficulty to get there, drive, park, or take a train to, which hurts us.
And on that thing about distances as well, this is another question from YouTube. It's going back to, I guess, from the Bearwood question and any new potential sites for training. With Reading being about 30 minutes away from Adams Park, how far would be your limit on distance from the stadium for a potential new training facility?
Well, I don't think, and I asked this question of Bloomfield and some others when we were looking at where we would go. And you know this because your office is principally at the training ground, but you only come up to the stadium 4 games and maybe once during the week. Matt does a little bit of the reverse. Matt Cecil, he'll do 2 days at the stadium and maybe 1 at the training ground. Most of our other members of staff are in one place or the other. So other than the sort of romantic vibe of being close to your stadium, where the training ground is not as important, the connectivity of those two, as it is a place the players can get to, where your sponsors can get to when we want them there. And if we were to acquire Bearwood, or if we acquire another place, we're going to look at probably, again, looking at putting in an academy. And then what's important is, can we get kids there or not? And right now, our place is hard to get them to.
A couple of questions that were sent in as well here. I'm going to combine 2 because they're very, very similar. One's from Oliver Dingley and the other one is from Rog Ramjet. Do you have plans to sell in the next 5 years? And the second part of Oliver's question has also been covered by Rog here. How important is it that any new owners are a good fit for us as a club over money that's paid for your asset?
I will be 75 next month. I always, in the back of my mind, assume that by 75, I'll be laying out next to the pool and not doing anything, much less taking a plane over once a month and spending 20 hours each way at a tin can. But I still enjoy it a lot. I see the things that we can do together that will have a lasting impact on the team. I am always looking to see who's the next guy or girl who would buy the club. And the commitment I've made is, when I introduce that person to the team and to the fans, it will be done with the understanding that that person will be a better owner than I am. He may not have the same skill set as I do, but he'll have other skills that I think are important. And I think that, it won't be a question of not having fun anymore or anything like that. It'll just be a question of fatigue, pure and simple.
And just to reiterate, that sounds like a commitment there that it's looking for the right person with the right intentions to develop the club and I guess build on the foundation that you provide them.
Absolutely. I've gotten to be friendly with, I think, all of the prior chairmen who are still living and about, and they all had that same sort of ambition to, can we make the club better? Sometimes they all get a little wounded by the fan reaction, because it's like, I've told you this before, no good deed ever goes unpunished. And there's a suspicion that, oh my God, these guys are doing it for whatever reason. So yeah, I'm going to find somebody I'm proud to call a friend, somebody I'm proud to say, here's my baby, please raise it the right way. Hope to come back for graduation. And we'll see how it goes.
Rob, we got a trip to Wembley coming up next month. I know you were more concerned about the league. League form has turned in our favour. The results have been very positive and we've moved into the top half now. Does that mean you can now get excited about Wembley?
We have a game Friday night, a week from Friday. I'll be excited when we play them. I'll be excited when we play our next game. And then I will be on the plane with my lovely wife to come see the game at Wembley and have a great time.
So that's a yes. Then you're excited about Wembley because we've been a bit. When can we start getting excited about it? Because I know you almost banned the W word at one point.
I think we have 2 games between now and then, don't we?
We do, yeah.
Yeah. How about we stay excited on those 2 games?
Well, we're always excited about those games.
I will admit this one little thing, though, Phil. Missy went out and bought a new green dress today, and I said, "What the heck's that for?" St. Patrick's Day was 2 days ago. She says, "I'm going to Wembley."
There you go. Wembley fever is alive and well in Louisiana. We are in the green shirt as well, by the way. I noticed the scarves arrived in the shop today. The merchandise is arriving. So we're hopefully to get some Wembley fever going. And where are we at with the tickets in terms are we able to sell now unreservedly? Because we've had an issue, haven't we?
The EFL has released the issue. People can buy the tickets now, even if they're from Reading's hometown and whatever. I want to say we've sold 11,000 so far, which is a pretty good sale for us, particularly the way we've been rolling them out. Ryan Isaac, who is our ticket guy, has done a fabulous job, he and his guys. And so I think we're on course to we'll probably sell from our standpoint Ryan will kill me when I say this, between 15 and 20,000. I think Peterborough will probably be in that same number. Then there will be another 10,000 people. So any kind of luck at all, you'll be looking at 40 to 45,000 people at the game, which is a heck of an attendance for the Bristol City Motor Trophy Cup game.
You nearly got the name of the trophy right, Rob. That's not a bad effort. Well done. Well, Rob, thank you for your time this evening. I hope that's answered a lot of questions or been entertaining as well for some people watching in. And it's great to have a football club chairman able to communicate with fans like this, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I enjoy it. You know that. I always tell you guys to ask the hardest questions you can think of because, in getting the hard questions from real fans or real journalists, it forces us to rethink what we're doing. We're not embarrassed to rethink sometimes and say maybe we were headed in the wrong direction or whatever. So that's fine. I encourage all of our fans to continue to write. Let's all be civil with each other, though, and we'll have a good time.
Rob, that's a great way to end this. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yes,
and in the meantime, we've got 2 league games, and then we're off to Wembley, and we'll see you there. Rob, thanks for joining us. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Right, there we are. That was Rob Couhig, the Wycombe Wanderers chairman. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, your comments, your questions in advance, your questions through the show as well. We like to do these as often as we can. So it's all about your questions, really. So we hopefully given you a platform and given you some answers to your questions and cleared up a few things from that lovely social media that tends to put things out there that may or may not be true. There we are. Right, we'll leave you to get on with the rest of your evening. Like Rob said, no game for us this weekend due to international break. Wycombe next in action on Good Friday here at Adams Park against Portsmouth. We'd love to see you here, and if you can't, then don't worry, Wanderers TV will have you covered for that one. In the meantime, have a great evening, and come on, you Blues.